Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. My name is Chris Legaspi, and today we are going to continue with the composition lessons series. In this episode, we will discuss one of the most important books from one of the most important authors, arguably in history, the great Andrew Loomis, and the book will be Creative Illustration. So comment below if you have this book or have heard of it, Creative Illustration. Now, this book is much more than a composition book. It's actually, some consider it to be Loomis's best work, sort of his grand opus. So it has drawing, it has value, it has even color. But today we're going to touch on the composition side of the book. And we're going to start by taking an overview of some of the topics in the book and some of the highlights about Loomis in the book. I'm going to go into some lessons that I learned from the book. Now, there's, like I said, this book is much more in depth and it covers much more than composition. So I'm just going to touch on a few of the points that really resonate with me and I think are really important to discuss. Then we'll do some drawing together. We're going to do a lot of drawing today. We'll do some thumbnails, composition, sketching. So definitely have some pencil and paper or pen ready. And before we begin, if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to my free Insiders Club. Insiders Club members get first access to these weekly live streams, and you also get access to other live events, and you get discounts on courses and programs, along with access to free lessons and other free content available only to subscribers. So all you have to do is go to www.drawwithchris.com, and there you can enter your email and you'll be good to go. And before we begin, comment below. Let me know, where are you located? Where are you watching from? What time is it for you? I am currently in Thailand right now, and it's 10 in the morning for me. So thank you for joining me wherever you are. I know we have a lot of new audience members recently, so I really appreciate you being here if you're watching live or on replay. Creative Illustration is written by the great Andrew Loomis, originally published in 1947. Comment below if you have this book or have seen it. If you're watching this, I know you already know Andrew Loomis is, and if you don't, you have definitely seen his illustrations. If you're watching this, you are probably looking for art content online. You probably have seen Andrew Loomis's diagrams many, many times. He's most famous for his head drawing book, but he has many, many wonderful books actually. And this, to me, is just all of his books are very, very useful and very well organized, well written. This one is no exception. And like I said, it goes quite in depth into many facets of illustration, even covers career topics. And there's so many wonderful lessons in this book. So let's just talk about a few here. Here's a quote from the book. Design is always there to experiment with, to allow you to express yourself in your own way. It is the thing that makes or breaks you when everything else is said and done. Wow. So he here is talking about composition, design, composing your picture, arranging your picture. It's always there for you, and it allows you to express yourself in your own way. So we're all free to design our pictures in any way. You know, many of us watching are probably into realistic figure drawing, realistic head drawing. And even within those parameters, you know that on the surface, to the layperson, realistic art, you know, realistic illustration is all very constricted, right? But you do have a lot of freedom to express yourself. And part of that is how you design your picture. And what I like about this is this statement right here. It is the thing that makes or breaks you when everything else is said and done. And this echoes something that I've always said, is that why I put such a high priority on designing the pictures, designing my pictures, is that if your picture is poorly designed, no one's going to want to look at it. You know what I mean? You can spend 200 hours on a life drawing or 200 hours on a portrait and, you know, make it the most masterful portrait in history or whatever, right? But if it's poorly, if the values are poorly structured, if the composition is ugly, if the elements are arranged incorrectly, if the color is badly designed, no one's going to want to look at your picture. So the design has to be there to get the initial attraction of the viewer, to get the initial communication, to get the initial read. So I really appreciate how Loomis put such a premium on composition. Here's another quote from his. The one hope of producing better work is through conception, not the material. So let me repeat that because it's important. The one hope of producing better work is through conception, not the material. So what is conception is what he just said: design, the composition, the arrangement. That is, according to Loomis, arguably one of the most important teachers in history of art. The one hope of producing better work. So, like he just said, if you want your picture to be any good, of any importance, for anybody to care about your picture, don't spend, you know, yes, the material is important, meaning the things, the details, the rendering, the edges, how beautiful your eyes are, how pretty your core shadow is. Yes, that is nice, but the one hope of producing better work, of getting any picture worth a damn, is through the conception, the design, the planning. So, wow, that is quite a remarkable statement from a very, very, very important, historically important person, Andrew Loomis. So let's follow the great Loomis. Let's put some work into the composition. Now let's go through some of the lessons of the book, starting with lesson number 1 is the primacy of line. When I first reviewed this book, I noticed something very, very cool that I knew intuitively about Loomis, is that line really is the core visual component. It's the backbone or the beginning of his drawing, of his philosophy. And in this book in particular, it's a huge chunk of chapter 1, line. Here it is. Here's the actual first page of chapter 1 in the book. And it says line. So here, there's 7 functions of line. Let's quickly read them. Number 1, to convey its own intrinsic beauty. To divide or limit an area or space. 3, to delineate a thought or symbol. 4, to define edge or contour. 5, to catch and direct the eye over a given course. 6, to produce a gray or tonal gradient. And 7, to create design or arrangement. So that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about number 2, divide or limit area or space. 7, to create design or arrangement. Wow, that is remarkable. And line, as you know, is the core of what any realist artist does. And for him to define it in such a simple and elegant way is remarkable. That is wonderful. So line is quite important to Loomis and obviously to us, and specifically for composition. Let's take a look at some things that he said about this. So line divides space. It creates arrangements. Here also, here's a couple pages from the book. He says line is the first principle of composition. Overlapping line and area is the first principle of composition. So he's talking about lines in design, lines in form, and overlapping creates many, many things. It creates depth, it creates space, creates intersections. So overlapping lines in areas is the first principle of composition. And here you can see some examples here by Loomis, and you can see how lots of the sketching is done in line, and I'm exactly the same way. And here at this page, you can see just some really interesting curves using, this page is titled, Using the First Function of Line for Itself. And line for itself is, remember his first definition of line is to convey its own intrinsic beauty. Line in itself is intrinsically beautiful, and I would agree. I think many of you watching would agree. You can see, wow, very pretty lines here. And you can see how these lines turn into compositions eventually. And this is the way, if you've seen any videos in this series of any of my sketching videos, this is how I start my compositional process is just by sketching with lines. So this really reinforces to me what I was doing, is valid and where it comes from. Because, there's no right or wrong way to sketch, to design, to compose images. Molly Banks suggests paper cutouts, which is totally valid. Some artists use blocks of tone and shape and value, which is totally valid, but line is also a wonderful way to begin because, as Loomis said, line in itself is just very pretty, intrinsically beautiful. Lesson number 2, formal versus informal design. So this is, again, something that comes up quite a bit in the early chapters of the book, the idea of formal and informal design. And this is related to line because, as you can see, these pages are basically line drawings. So line, he uses line. Remember, according to Loomis, one of the 7 primary functions of line is to create design or arrangement and to divide or limit an area or space. So line can divide space, and these little spaces that you make, if you arrange them, they create your composition, of course. So here we have formal and informal design. And one way to think about this is something that what I call symmetric versus asymmetric. So symmetrical design, obviously you can cut it in half, in thirds, diagonally, and it will produce a symmetrical, or what Loomis calls a formal design structure. And here on the right, you can see ways to do asymmetric, counterbalanced design structures, or what he calls informal. So there's many ways to arrange a picture, but this is an interesting way to think about it, symmetric versus asymmetric. Now, I always say that symmetric, if you've taken my composition classes or my movie poster courses, I say that generally you want to avoid symmetrical design because it can be boring, but there is a time and a place for symmetrical design. And here Loomis talks about formal or symmetrical design and composition. So one way, you can see this page on the right, is full of symmetrical compositions. And one way, one context to use symmetrical design that works very, very well in this context is for something that is important, such, for example, religious figures and decorative things that need to read as very, very important, prominence, dominance. Here, according to Loomis here, there are times when we wish to achieve great dignity of arrangement. Since the creator's basic design for animated form, arrangement on the same plane text. What he's saying here, since the body is symmetrical, when we create symmetrical design, it creates, he calls it a dignity. Dignity is an English word that means something of high value, high status, high importance, like a king, in society, a king or a politician or whatever, or a famous business person would be a dignified person. Church murals invariably follow this plan. It may be used to great advantage in symbological subjects appeals for charity, heroic subjects, or suggest peace and serenity. Formal balance was almost the only approach in earlier times. What he's saying is that before the Renaissance innovations, that's all composers knew, is formal mathematical compositions. Formal subdivisions may also be used informally if one is adept enough. I have introduced on the next page another method. So formal balance was typically used to do these, very religious, iconic things. So in your painting, you don't have to do religious paintings, obviously, but in your work, if you want your subject to feel very, very important, bordering on symbolic, heroic, religious, this is the one context where formal design would be a great place to use it. So this is very, very, very cool and clearly stated here by Loomis. And just incidentally, look on this page on the right, look at my good old friend here, the asymmetric composition here. Here he calls it fulcrum lever. Comment below, does this look familiar? Where have we seen this before? Right, besides, I talk about this all the time. I call this the counterbalance scale. But we saw this in the last composition lessons with Edgar Payne. Edgar Payne talks about this. He calls this the steel yard. So here is that wonderful asymmetrical design here, again reinforced by this time by the great Loomis. Lesson number 3, emotional response. So emotional response, and when I was reviewing this book, when I saw this chapter, I go, oh, it immediately, I had to stop because one of the things that I have evolved to understand and to practice in my own work is the psychology of composition, specifically with line and shape, especially after reading Molly Bang and having her remind me of the importance of psychology. So when I saw this, I was like, oh boy, this is, this is not new. I always say my information is the best. And I can say that because none of it is mine. None of it is mine. The idea of triggering emotional or psychological response, of consciously trying to trigger a psychological response with your viewer using your composition is nothing new. I didn't invent it. Molly Bang didn't invent it. Even the great Loomis didn't invent it here. So you can see just on the left here, some really interesting diagrams talking about various emotions, feelings, psychology that can be triggered. Here's one, for example, upper right, this radiant line. Radii for, radii meaning radiating lines, plural, for glory, devotion, duty, patriotism, unity, ambition, right? Generally, you feel very, very positive when you see these radiating lines. Curved lines, right? Charm, grace, relaxation, movement. Triangle, permanence, stability, security, right? Wide base. That's narrow at the top with a wide base. That is ultimately very, very stable and secure. Curves, ovals for femininity, creative, sensuosity, grace. There you go. Ovals, I talked about that many times. And then rectangle, stability, strength, unity. The rectangle and the square are very, very stable forms. So those create those feelings in your pictures, right? Angular lines, intersecting lines create compulsion, agitation. So you can see Loomis was very, very aware of the importance of psychology. And here in this page, this is an interesting page because he talks about how bad composition brings a negative response. And this is something that I have thought of for years before I really organized my thoughts into any sort of course or compositional program. The one thing that I always felt as a young artist or as a developing artist is that when I saw some paintings that had poor composition, I felt very, very uncomfortable. I was like, oh, something about that is just not right. You can't put it into words, maybe. Comment below if you have felt this way, or maybe in your own work. I know I'm guilty of it. Maybe, you're scrolling through Instagram or you're scrolling online for artwork or reference, or maybe you go to a museum or maybe you go to an opening or something and you see some work, some paintings, and you're like, oh my goodness, they are just off and they just make you feel wrong, Now, if you consciously want to make your viewer feel sad or uncomfortable, that is a totally different thing. That is a totally valid thing. And I think that is an important skill to have, is the ability to make your audience feel bad consciously, right? If you want to scare them, if you want to make them feel sad, that is good to do. That's very, very powerful. But when you don't intend to make your audience uncomfortable because your composition is off, that's not good. We want to avoid that. So let's look at some examples here on the upper left here. You can see this first example, he wrote the word bad. And if you just look at it by itself, it's like, wow, it's quite unnerving. It makes me very uncomfortable. She's standing, staring at us basically, the background is very flat, very symmetric. It's just very creepy, right? It kind of feels like one of those creepy Asian horror movies with, the long black-haired ghost girl that is coming at you. That's what it reminds me of. It's like, oh, creepy, creepy, creepy. So let's not do that. Symmetrical, plain, ugly, symmetrical, boring, dead, lifeless pose, dead, lifeless, too symmetrical, too formal, is what Loomis would call it. So we definitely want to avoid that. You can see here when you put a figure, here he says, putting a figure too low and centered, and also putting the figure's head at center line will cut. You see how the horizontal and vertical center cut right through the figure, that figure's head. So we definitely want to avoid that. So it makes us very uncomfortable, right? This vertical line right here just cuts right through this subject's head. So that's very, very unnerving. We don't want to do that. So those are just some interesting thoughts about how to consciously create emotion and the negative consequences if you don't put thought about your design of your pictures. You can create negative response in your viewer. And lesson number 4, the big tone approach. What is the big tone approach? Now, this book, Creative Illustration, like I said, it covers so many topics: line, figure drawing, head drawing, color, and also, of course, any composition book, any illustration book worth its salt must talk about value, of course. And of course, the great Loomis talks about tonal composition, value composition. Comment below if you are tired of hearing me talk about this. If you have watched any of my videos in the last 15 years, I probably said tonal composition at least once in every video. If you followed me for a while, you're probably sick of me talking about it. But like I said, it's not me. Don't blame me. Go back in history and go yell at Rembrandt. Go yell at Caravaggio. Go yell at Loomis. It's not me. Go yell at Steve Huston. Steve Huston first taught it to me. So tonal composition. I mean, come on, come on. Is this not one of the core bread and butters of composition, of realist philosophy? Realist philosophy is built on line and tone. Two of the base of the pyramid of realist drawing philosophy is line and tone, or value. So value composition, of course, the great Loomis, the great Loomis talks about value composition, and he calls it the big tone approach, which is essentially value grouping. Limited values and value grouping is what Loomis calls the big tone approach. Comment below if you are tired of me talking about limited values. Oh my God. In the last 15 years of making videos, I probably have said those two words at least once in every video. Limited values, value groups. Oh my God, you're probably sick of me saying those things. But like I said, don't take it up with me. Go take it up with Loomis. So the big tone approach is value grouping, limiting your values. Of course, we already know to do that. Of course, the great Loomis is going to talk about it in arguably his most important book. Specifically, there was an interesting part in this chapter that I want to read that really grabbed my attention. And he calls it the postery statement. Here he says in page 112, he says, sometimes the simple postery statement is better than the more finished thing, for it is conceived and executed in truth. Truth in the larger sense, rather than the minute inspection of truth. One big truth is more understandable than a lot of little ones. Let me repeat that. Sometimes the simple postery statement is better than the finished thing. What is the postery statement? Big tone approach, big shapes of value, grouped value, and one big truth is more understandable than a lot of little ones. So what he's saying is big, simple, graphic shapes of tone and value are more understandable than a bunch of little ones. So what he's saying is, if you want your drawing, painting, illustration, magic card, poster, book cover, comic book page to read, to be clear, to have any sort of positive emotional impact on your audience, if you want anybody to care about your picture, organize your values into big, simple, quote unquote, postery statements. Big, simple, graphic, grouped shapes of value is, quote unquote, the truth. He calls this the truth, quote, end quote. The truth. Execute the truth. Wow. Wow, that is awesome. So again, a lot of what I teach, I think is the best information in the world. It has changed my life. Tonal composition is one of the things that changed my life. For those of you who are new to me, don't know my story, I was a broke ass wannabe artist for years. I grew up in a small town in America. I'm an immigrant to America. I grew up in a small town that didn't have movie poster studios. We didn't have animation studios. We didn't have galleries like in New York. So, in order for me to accomplish anything of value in my art career, I had to find this information. One of the things that I early on started to practice and internalize over again that had a big impact was simplified groups of value, understanding that value isn't about making little, isn't about copying infinite values that you see. It's about simplifying, organizing into these big tone approach, postery statements, or as Loomis also says, the truth. So the truth will set you free, my friends. Wow. Wow, 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 wow. Wow, 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 wow. That is so cool. So that's my sales pitch, my little soapbox for simplify and group your values, y'all. So let's do some drawing now. We already know this limited value stuff is important. Okay, draw along. Let's do our first draw along together. And this is the picture finder. So this is a lot like what we did in the previous episode with Edgar Payne. And here's a direct quote from page 30 in the book. He says, and I quote, cut a cardboard so as to make a picture finder. An opening of 3 to 4 inches is large enough. Jot down in miniature compositions the linear arrangements you find. Walk about the house or grounds, that means your backyard. Don't go farther until you have done a dozen or two small roughs. So this is a direct quote from the book, and we're going to follow the great Loomis advice. I always say, don't take my advice, go to someone better than me. Loomis is one of the most important teachers in history, so I think it's a good idea to follow his advice. We're going to do this little exercise. We're going to go through a picture together with a little picture finder, and we're going to do, as Loomis says, jot down, which means write down or sketch, miniature compositions and linear arrangements. We're not going to go farther, meaning don't develop your drawing until you have done a dozen or two small roughs. And here, this is important too, because a lot of people ask me, hey, Chris, how many thumbnails should I do? How many compositions should I do? How much time do I spend on a composition? I say, do as many as it takes. And here, Loomis gives a specific number, a dozen or two small roughs. A dozen or two, a dozen is 12. So 24 small roughs. So get your reps. Composition is a muscle. I always say composition is a muscle. If you want composition skills, just like you want bigger muscles, guess what you have to do? You have to put in some damn reps. You have to put in some damn reps. And I know for a lot of people, composition is a lot of work. It is. Composition is work. It takes mental work, which is much more difficult than physical labor. So that's why a lot of people avoid it. It is quite mentally draining. But again, you want the truth? You want your work to be remembered in history like Loomis? You got to put in some reps. So let's do that today. Now, okay. So the first draw along, we're going to do Loomis's picture finder exercise. We're going to go in and about the house and outside, and we're going to take our little viewfinder and see if we can come up with a dozen or two line sketches. So we have a little thingy here, and let's see. Let's take a look at the whole thing. You're like, wow, it's pretty interesting. My viewfinder's a little big, but let me settle on this one. Here's one right here. Let me start with that. A dozen or so line sketches. Don't develop them further. So we have an L here, and Loomis also talks about the L, which we also mentioned in the previous video. And we're not going to develop these, right? Loomis said, don't develop them. Just come up with some line sketches. This one has a better perspective, which is, it's not that much fun for me. Got a little thing here, little light here. Try to get some of this value there. I think I'm putting too much into it now. I'm gonna move on. Yeah. Okay. That's all right. That's a first attempt. It's not the greatest, but that's okay. Let's see. Picture. Oh, that's a nice one. It's a nice one. It's a nice one. Let's see. It's a nice one. Maybe in a corner. Oh, just that. Let's do this central thing. That's pretty nice right there. I like that. Let's do one together here. Hmm. I'm getting too nitpicky with tone here. I need to remember Loomis's advice. Postery read, the big tone approach, the truth. Loomis said simplified shapes and values are the truth. So I'm going to definitely listen to his advice. There's another big shape there. Okay, that's it's okay. Got a little bit of potential. Let's do one more. I like this little fan thing in the corner. That looks kind of cool. Let me see if I can tighten this composition a little bit. Well, that looks nice right there. Yeah, I like that. Little fan thing is so cool. So you can see you can get a lot of good practice in just in your own home, your own even your own room. Let's say you don't have your own house to yourself. Maybe you just have your bedroom or your little drawing table. You can still do this exercise in your environment. This is something I always recommend is for students who don't have a lot of space, is to make sure you have at least interesting things to look at in your little objects in your art table. I think everyone watching at least has a little table that you can draw on, that's you can use as your little art space. When I first moved to Thailand 5 years ago, I didn't have a house. I had a little tiny studio apartment that I first rented when I first arrived, and I didn't even have I had all I had was a little dining table, so that was became my little art space. And if I needed bigger space, I had to go outside. Actually, I had to go to like a coffee shop or go paint landscape. But anyway, so that's a nice little composition there. It's okay. So I'm going to stop here just for the sake of time. Obviously, you should do a lot more. Loomis says 12 or 24. So I only did 3, but for the sake of time, obviously I got to keep going. But this is definitely a fun exercise. And he says, don't do this just inside your house. Of course, you can take this exercise and do it outside your house. And this is, again, like what we did Edgar Payne lesson using the viewfinder. So you can see a great way to practice composition is by taking a viewfinder just to your environment, to the world you already live in. You can find and practice the compositional principles that we discussed here today. Okay, we're going to do our final demo here, and you can draw along with me as well. This is going to be a fun compositional exercise. And this is also taken from the book. We're going to do some compositional sketches to illustrate the story of Old Mother Hubbard. And Old Mother Hubbard is an American nursery rhyme. It's a rhyme taught to children. And this nursery rhyme is before my time. It's a bit of more in Loomis's generation, before the 1950s and 60s and things like that. So the story of Old Mother Hubbard goes like this. Old Mother Hubbard went to the cupboard to get her dog a bone. And when she got there, she discovered it was bare. And then something, 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 something. Basically, a woman named Old Mother Hubbard went to the cupboard, which is the kitchen, went to the pantry, the place in the kitchen where you store your food. She wanted to get her dog a bone. And when she got there, the cupboard was empty and the dog doesn't have a bone. Oh, that's a sad story. Old Mother Hubbard went to the cupboard to get her dog a bone. And when she was there, she discovered it was bare. Okay, so we're going to draw, and these little illustrations are by Loomis here. They're from the book. So you can be inspired by these, or I'm going to sketch my own from imagination. So we're going to try to do at least 10 thumbnail line sketches, sort of exactly what Loomis talked about. Remember line, the importance of line, informal and formal design. And then we're going to do 3 refined tonal compositions. So we're going to take some and refine those. So thumbnail sketching only, black and white. Some questions to ask are, what is the focal point? What is the meat of the design? I'll explain what that means. And formal or informal design. So what is the focal point? So we have basically 3 subjects. We have Old Mother Hubbard, the main character, her dog, and then whatever she's looking for in the cupboard. So the cupboard is the room, the kitchen, an object. So which one of those do we want to highlight as the focal point? Which one will be secondary? So remember, all of these things we should consider now in the thumbnail sketch. Question number 2, what is the meat? And meat is something that Loomis mentioned in the book as, he basically means, what is the value structure? when he says what is the meat of the picture, he means what is dark, what is inherently light, what is inherently mid-tone, what is a big shape? Is there a big shape of light? Like if you're doing a landscape and there's a big white cloud in the sky, that would be the meat of your tonal composition. The meat of the tonal composition is the white of the sky. Or let's say you're doing a scene of a character wearing a black cloak. So the big character wearing the dark black coat would be the compositional meat of your tonal composition. So meat, what is the value structure? What is dominantly light? What is dominantly dark? What takes up a lot of space? And that will be up to us. That will be up to us here. So that's something to think about is, you know, do I want old Mother Hubbard to be wearing a black dress? Do I want old Mother Hubbard wearing a white dress? Do I want the dog to be black? Do I want the dog to be gray, a middle tone? Do I want the dog to be huge? Do I want the dog to be a small value shape? Do I want the room to be light? Do I want the room to be black or dark? Right. So that is the meat, the tonal structure. And then also informal or formal design, right? Do we want the formal, the formality, symmetrical design is what we're saying very important, symbolic, maybe? Or do we want more informal design, which is more asymmetric, more what we're accustomed to typically? So just something to think about. And formal design can be used, but it needs some skill to make it look interesting because it is so symmetrical. But anyway, those are definitely things to consider, and we'll consider those as we draw. So old Mother Hubbard went to the cupboard to get her dog a bone. Okay, what the heck does that look like? Let's find out. Old Mother Hubbard went to the cupboard to get her dog a bone. So there's a woman, a dog, and a kitchen, basically. So a woman, a dog, kitchen. Okay, so the L comes to mind. And one thing Loomis said in the book that's really cool, he said, I'm going to paraphrase, I don't know the exact quote, but he said, to paraphrase what he said was, you can do your thinking and planning as you sketch, which is great. I'm glad he mentioned that because that's something I do. Is sometimes I don't quite know what I want yet, and I'm sure a lot of you can relate. You don't know right away how you want your composition to be, so you just sketch, you just draw, you sketch, you let your ideas flow on paper, and that's what we're doing here. So I'm just gonna sketch and think and maybe hopefully try to explain what I'm doing in a way that makes sense. I'm gonna put a picture here, a picture frame. Oh, it's gonna be devastating. That's not bad. That's not bad. So I got old Mother Hubbard, empty cupboard, a dog, and I know my dog looks like a llama. I already know my dog, my little dog's. I'm not an animal guy. Yeah. Don't. I already know. I don't need to hear it. Okay. So old Mother Hubbard and her llama or goat, whatever this is. It doesn't quite look like a dog, but whatever. She went to the cupboard and discovered it was bare. Hmm. So this is them standing up with the L design. Let's try, because when I think of this scene, right, you go to the cupboard, you try to get food, and there's no food. That's pretty sad. That's pretty sad. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to curve the figures. I'm going to do a little tighter crop so you can see their expressions. Looks like a cat now. Jeez, you can tell I don't draw animals. And then I'm gonna put old mother here, and I'm gonna make sure she's curved over. And then I'm gonna put the cupboard here, and it's bare, and she's looking at her dog like, oh, there's nothing for you to eat. I'm so sorry. What? Hmm. Let me put her hand here. She's trying to explain to the dog, oh, nothing. So this is interesting. It's a tight crop. It has a hand, not much of the background, but it has some potential. Still kind of communicates the story. So let's keep going here. Let's see. Did the tight crop? How about I like the L. Let's do so it's kind of sad. That means oh, sad. Typically things low to the bottom, they feel very heavy. So let's do that. I'm just gonna draw them really small, and I'm gonna make old Mother Hubbard sort of kneeling down to her dog. Oh, I'm so sorry. There's no food in the cupboard. And the dog's like, no, no, I wanted some food. And then let's put the big dark thing up here. So some kind of dark and heavy thing up here. And then the cupboard's here. And then maybe the house is kind of run down and cracked, and life's not too good right now for old Mother Hubbard and her empty cupboard. Here's the doors open and it's empty, and she's kind of hunched over, a little disappointed. The dog's kind of hunched over, a little sad and disappointed. It's kind of cool. So putting them at the bottom adds visual weight above them. So I'm going to try to come up with things that feel really heavy above them. Not quite sure how I'm going to do that, but it's just an idea there. And here's a window maybe. So it shows there's a little bit of hope. Probably do this with value of like a big old tone above them. Okay, let's do one more little thumbnail. Of course, I would do a lot more. Loomis, how many? Loomis says how many? 12, 12 to 24. So, so there you go. One more. So the L looks nice. The close-up looks pretty nice. You can see their faces and the emotion, but less of the environment. Here you can see a lot of the environment, and their emotions are conveyed through their body language. So that's really nice. A lot of potential there. How about so circular would be too balanced. So this goes back to the meat. Well, not so much the meat, but remember the importance of line, psychology, and informal. Remember, we just talked about that, right? So this would be formal, perfect circle, straight in, smack dab in the middle. This would be informal, right? Circle, asymmetric. But psychology-wise, the circle is generally a little bit positive, right? It's kind of it's curved, it's soft, it's round, it's inviting, right? So the curve idea, story-wise, doesn't fit here. I want this to feel sad. I want it to feel heavy. I want it to feel empty. When I think of empty, oh, I got it. What if put the characters here, put them in a rectangle format, kind of like what we got there. So a big, heavy rectangle and a mostly empty. I got it. So she's here. So kind of like what we just had. What we just did next to it. The cupboard is way down here. So their cupboard is close to the ground. And it's empty. And the dog is like, oh man, oh, not a good day for me. Oh, I'm gonna make the dog small. Should I make the dog small? Let's try. I'm gonna try one more with the big dog. Let's see the impact. So here's the dog small with a cupboard. And this is a big horizontal thing that I'm gonna put here. Horizontal means many things psychologically, but one thing horizontal means is death, somber, heaviness. Because when you're dead, guess what position your coffin will be in? You know, it ain't gonna be standing vertical, that's for sure. Vertical is the opposite. Vertical means life. It means standing, erect, life, reaching, tower. Horizontal means can mean death in certain in depends on the context, but and then I'm just gonna put some empty shelves. This poor woman has a cupboard. She doesn't have much here, just a table. Really, that's it. And then maybe just a table would be enough. And maybe one chair to emphasize, and then a crack, and then all of this empty space. So I like this one right here because the cupboard is bare. So I kind of want it to feel empty and sad. I'm just going to put a bunch of empty negative space at the top. In fact, this can go even lower. Ooh. So too low, I think. Maybe a little lower. There you go. There you go. I like that a lot. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to move forward just for the sake of time. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to see if the dog is better if it's big. Which one is more sad and depressing and somber? If you have a big dog that needs food, maybe, huh? Maybe. If you have a huge dog, like a Great Dane or something. What if the dog's looking at her like, oh, why, lady? Why? Why'd you let me down? Ooh, my dog looks like a deer. Actually, a big dog looking at her. What do you guys think? I think it looks a bit more sad. And that's the feeling I want. A little bigger dog. Well, it's a lot bigger in this case. What if we make the dog dark? But we'll figure that out later. Actually, I like that idea. I'm gonna. Okay, I really like this. I really like this. So that's my little line sketch. Obviously, you should do a lot more. Remember, composition is a muscle. Just like if you want bigger muscles in the gym, you got to do what? Put in your reps. Don't stop at 5, please. This is, and you should be having fun by now. Hopefully, I enjoy this process. Typically, the more I sketch, it starts to get fun. You start to loosen up and ideas start to flow. So please, 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 please don't stop at 5, but I got to move forward for the sake of time here. Okay, the second part of exercise is to do some tonal comps, right? Tonal comps are the truth, according to Loomis. So we want the truth. We want our work to ring true, as Steve Houston says. We want our pictures to read, like I always say. So I'm going to refine it and then add a tonal comp, add some tone so I can make those decisions. I'm going to put her hand here. That looks a bit more sad when she's like, oh no. And I'm going to make her hand empty. It's nothing. Oh, sorry, buddy. It's like, I got nothing, buddy. It's empty. You see? Cupboard's empty. Empty, 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 empty. Empty, 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 empty. Where I live, I moved to a new house, and where I live has a lot more trees. You can hear the cicadas really loud. Okay, so I'm just going to do some quick tonal comps, starting with the dog. Remember, what is the meat? The meat is what is the value structure? What's light, what's dark, what takes up a lot of space? The meat gets to the truth. Now my dog looks like a capybara. Comment below if you know what a capybara is. Those of you in Latin America or in Brazil, you know what a capybara. Capybara is like a little jungle bear looking creature, like a little fat little bear that lives in Latin America. It looks like a deer now. Oh boy, animal needs some help. So what I think I'll do, I'll make everything mid-tone, kind of this kind of gray. This kind of gray indescript world. Empty cupboards. Oh boy. The woman's in white. My old mother Hubbard has white hair. And this big, depressing emptiness looming over them. Oh, that is sad. That is sad. Feels like a big cloud. Might be a little too dark. Let's see. Oh, that's pretty nice right there. Sort of this kind of murky half tone emptiness above them, around them. Not much going on. kind of like that. Kind of like that. It's creepy and sad and empty. That's exactly the feeling that I want. Low contrast, emptiness. I wonder if the dog is spotted. How would that look versus just a solid black, dark shaped dog? Hmm. So there's a lot of potential to play with the value structure here, meaning like in terms of psychology, should white represent emptiness? And that if that's the case, I'm going to keep it generally bright and darken maybe the woman. That might be a good thing to do. Okay, so that's my first try at a tonal comp. Light colored character, gray, dark, heavy, murky world, dark colored dog. So that's my meat. Let me try another combination here. Okay, I'm going to, oh, that looks very oppressive. I like that. I like that a lot. Oh, what did they get? A bright world. No, you see how the value feels happy, feels bright, right? Feels like, oh, this lot of hope. But we do this. Oh, no, no, oppressive. No, cloud. I should put a little window there, and that might be nice. Let's see what that looks like. Just for fun, let's see. If a window. Okay, it's got some potential. It's a little too bright. You know, she has a little bit of hope in her dog's life. It's a little too bright. That's not too bad, but it's also ugly and distracting. It's not the simple. Remember, we want, according to Loomis, we want to stay as simple as possible. We want to communicate the truth. The truth is simplicity. Less is more. What if I think they should both be fairly dark? Now, if she's dark, the problem with that is psychologically, it makes her feel, you feel a little bit negative about her. So maybe I'll make her like I'll give her a white skirt. Yeah, that's nice, a little half and half. Because if I make her all black, she'll read like a villain, basically, in a way. You will psychologically have a negative connotation towards our character, Little Miss Hubbard, if I make her black, like a Darth Vader, this black, 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 especially in the daytime. So this will be in the daytime. I want to keep the cupboards fairly bright. The empty cupboards. I want them to be obviously okay. This is obviously empty. And then the dog is. What if the dog is black and white like her? Oh, that's not bad either, actually. Yes, it looks like a little mini cow now, like a spotted dog. That's nice, actually. Okay, I like that. because now they relate, and it kind of feels like black and white. It feels like good and bad, good times and bad times. That's how I'm going to interpret it. As if, hey, they had food once, now they're empty. So now they're going through a hard time. So they have had food, they had good times before, but now they're going through a hard time. So I think that is a good stopping point here. I think this is a pretty nice composition, a tonal composition. Obviously, it needs a lot more work, but that's what we do. And with this process is you iterate, you plan. I'm going to stop here for the sake of time. Again, please don't stop at two. I'm going to say it for the next 15 years. Don't stop at two compositions. You got to put in your reps. So please don't stop at two. That's what we do. Workout combinations, right? Should she be black? Should she be white? Should she be dark gray? Should she be mid-tone gray? Should her skirt be black? Should the dog be spotted? Should the dog be all white? Should the top be light? Should the top be darker? Should the ground be bright? You know what I mean? These combinations we have to figure out. And now is the time, now is the time. And it can be a lot of fun. And you'll see as you explore, you'll get lots of new ideas, you'll get inspired, and you'll refine your composition. Remember, Loomis said, design is the way to get a finer picture. You want hot pictures like Loomis? This is where the magic happens right here. Yeah, if you're doing this exercise, definitely keep going and definitely share your results. I think it'd be a lot of fun to see what you guys come up with.